Yeah, I need to talk about, unfortunately, I need to talk about marijuana again. Well, the thing is, what marijuana's got really popular lately because of rastafarianism. It's been, the whole Rastafarian culture has been popular since Bob Marley, and ever since Bob Marley popularised the look, just the dreadlocks and the multicoloured beanie thing and the whole alternative stance. I think it's worth noting that Rastafarianism is not anything anyone thinks it is. It's one of those things that has a popular public relations sort of image. And what is it? It's cute Jamaicans talking in a Jamaican accent. Yeah, Jamaicans, easygoing people, and there's reggae. And there's reggae with its, since the 80s, it's sort of light social criticism and well, it was never really clear what Bob Marley was singing about. I mean, he was singing about something about slavery and there were references in reggae songs, even Boney M, by the Rivers of Babylon. There was this Rastafarian idea of slavery in Babylon, like in the Old Testament, and there's this modern day allegory, which is borrowed from Christianity, this idea. But the thing is, you see, Rastafarianism was a thing that grew up in Jamaica, and it drew on symbols and things and ideas and cultural concepts from Ethiopia. Why Ethiopia? Because in Ethiopia, or what's called Abyssinia, there is an ancient Christian country. The Abyssinian church has been in Ethiopia for centuries and centuries, and it's got ancient traditions, and there's the ancient language, which is called Amharic, and there's a lot of old texts in Old Ethiopic, possessed by the monks of the Abyssinian Church. Now, the thing is, there's also in Ethiopia, there's also, for a long-standing Jewish community called the Falasha Jews, and so there's this ancient thousand-year-old Christian culture in Ethiopia, there's a national myth, a famous poem called the Kebra Nagas, which talks about the origin of the Ethiopian rulers and royal family in the Middle Ages. Their origins from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba and obviously King David. So the Kebra Nagas says that ultimately the Ethiopian royal family are descended from King David. Now that, by the way, is a claim made by, in the Middle Ages, it was a claim made by many ruling dynasties in Europe and all around the world. In the Middle Ages, the English kings claimed to be descended from King David. But that's another story. But the fact is, this claim that the Ethiopians are the lost tribe of Israel, in effect, they're obviously not the only tribal culture in the world that claims that, but it's not. It's neither here nor there. It's not. You wouldn't have thought it would be necessarily have much of an effect on their Christian doctrines or their beliefs, the thing about Rastafarianism is it sort of invokes an African origin for the Africans in the West Indies. Now there's a number of problems with that, because most of the Africans who were enslaved in Africa and sent to the West Indies to work in sugar plantations and ultimately in the cotton fields in the south, antebellum, the thing was most of those slaves were actually captured or bought in West Africa, Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and all those places, Burkina Faso, Senegal, all those places are thousands and thousands of miles away from Ethiopia. Well, I mean, like Africans living in the West Indies, and claiming to have some kind of African cultural roots, it's bogus in the sense that they're not the people who ever were Ethiopians or had any connection to the Abyssinian church. And I mean, this idea that Rastafarianism is a form of Christianity is well, the thing is, it's very strange, because Rastafarianism was based on this claim that Haile Selassie, the king of who was king of Ethiopia in the 60s, there was this claim that Haile Selassie was the incarnation of God. He was God on Bob Marley used to go around saying that Haile Selassie was God Almighty. And this isn't just some random utterances. This was the foundation belief of Rastafarianism. And it's dressed up in meta-Jewish thinking, like he's like the Messiah, or it's dressed up in some kind of distorted heretical, like very distorted heretical Christian thinking. Like I mean, there's Rastafarians who are conversant with the New Testament, and they'll use gospel language to talk about Haile Selassie, like the good news of His Majesty. And they're not talking about Jesus, they're talking about Haile Selassie. The gospel of His Majesty. And it's so, I'm sorry, it's so, it's not even, well, I mean, if you read about Gnostic heresies in the early centuries AD, there was lots of Gnostics, but all of them had some kind of, because Greek philosophy was really popular in early centuries AD, and there was always some identifiable Platonic element, if badly hidden, in Gnostic teachings, but there was always some kind of identifiable belief structure in the systems of the Gnostics. But the thing is about the Haile Selassie thing and Rastafarianism is it's not even coherent. I mean, it's just so, this idea that tonight I have to talk about well, Rastafarianism and Ethiopia. Now, it's in the news lately. Rastafarianism. Well, lately the rapper Snoop Dogg has been going around claiming to be the reincarnation of Bob Marley. Now, whatever. Well, I mean, suffice it to say that, well, that's Rastafarianism. It seems like Rastafarianism's had undergone a change from being sort of a form, kind of Jewish cult or heresy to being a form of Hinduism or something. The funny thing is, well, funny. You see, Rastafarianism is not African. There's a lot of people in America and, say, the Caribbean, former slaves, lots of Americans around, who try to revive or talk about African cultural roots. And a lot of them sound silly. Well, I mean, it's like a lot of Americans talking about their German roots, and what do? They have like, yeah, it's like a bit silly. They have like Oompa bands. They have a day. They have like a cultural day where they drink beer and eat hot dogs, and have brass bands and listen to polkas. I mean, now, sure, in America, a kind of cultural revivalism is popular amongst all kinds of people. And, yeah, it can be a bit silly. I mean, people just having one day a year they have like maybe an Indian day or an Arabic day or a French day or something, and they have a family reunion and they get around and they eat specific foods, specific to the culture, and they listen to music, and it's a thing they do. But it's not, people don't take that sort of revivalism very seriously. I mean, but in America you see, amongst American blacks, there's a lot of that sort of thing. I mean, she's world famous. There's this in Oakland, California. There was a woman in the 90s who worked in the Oakland Greyhound station called Sheba, and she'd answer the phone. And she said, "Sheba speaking." Now, anyway, yeah, Queen of Sheba. Well, and that's an interesting question, because is that African or is it Arab, or is it, I mean, what is this whole habit that modern black Americans have of evoking some kind of African, Middle Eastern cultural roots? And yeah, and well, that's the funny thing about Rastafarianism, because Rastafarianism is grew up largely invented in the West Indies, Jamaica, and it was largely invented by one guy, or popularized by one guy, Bob Marley. Now, turns out there is, in fact, in Abyssinia or Ethiopia, a very ancient African culture. An ancient Christian church which has, it's still there, ancient tribes with their rock, living in the mountains, and the churches cut out of rock and all that, and they've got ancient documents and parchments and manuscripts, some of which preserve works that have been lost to antiquity, like the Book of Enoch. I mean, no one, until they discovered the Ethiopic version of the Book of Enoch, no one knew what the full text actually said. Now, the Ethiopic church, the Abyssinian church, claims, well, there's various claims. I mean, there's an Ethiopic Abyssinian Jewish community, and there's a large Christian church, and they have lots of old parchments and documents, as I said, and there's some of them are Bibles, ancient Bibles, some of them are apocryphal biblical literature like the Book of Enoch, some of them are just traditional cultural works like the Keber-Nagast, which is an Ethiopic poem about the origins of the Abyssinian people. And the Keber-Nagast famously claims that the Queen of Sheba from the Old Testament, who visited Solomon, Ethiopic. Well, you see, it turns out that there's the Ethiopic language. For example, if you pick up a copy of the Brown, Driver and Briggs Hebrew Lexicon, it contains, for every Hebrew root word, it contains, because Gazanios was a guy who originally wrote this massive Hebrew dictionary, and it was edited, translated and edited by Brown, Driver and Briggs. And in it, Gazanios originally included, for every Hebrew word, he would include typically an Aramaic word and a cognate Arabic word, and very often, if you could find one, an Ethiopic word, because Ethiopic, and it's a massive task that Gazanios embarked on. But Ethiopic is classified as a Semitic language, like Arabic or Aramaic. old Akkadian. Now, the thing is, so you have in Ethiopia an ancient tribe who appear to be like ordinary Africans, and they've been there for centuries, and they speak a Semitic language similar to Hebrew. Now, that region is very close to Israel, and it's very close to. It's just across the Red Sea, very close to Arabia, and so having a large tribe of people who speak a Semitic language there is not a big surprise. But at the end of the day, you do have an authentic, ancient African Christian church, which has had influences all over the African continent over the centuries. The thing is, now there's also the famous Falasha Jewish community who apparently they have well, I think they benefit from having the Bible in the Ethiopic version as well. But there are an ancient sect of Judaism which doesn't acknowledge the Talmud. It only has the Torah. But anyway, the thing is, there is this ancient African culture, amongst others. But the Kabra-Nagast, for example, is a national myth of Abyssinia, and one thing it does is it claims that the ancient Ethiopian royal family are descended from King David via a relationship between King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Now that's a good example of some extra-biblical apocryphal writings that reflect maybe a late tradition. Some people would say that Sheba is just the same as the Sabaeans in like in the book of Job, or like the modern day the Al-Sabah family in Kuwait, which is an Arabic tribe. But yeah, the Sabaeans, some say the Sabaeans were from the Yemen. Anyway, the thing is, there's this ancient Ethiopic African culture which has some good things, some questionable things, like a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of countries have Christian cultures, ancient Christian cultures mixed up with lots of mythology, like King Arthur, like England, and King Arthur and his knights and whatever. The point is that now this brings us to Jamaica and Bob Marley, and the thing was, Rastafarianism is not really a Christian, or not really a Christian religion. Rastafarianism poses as a genuine African spirituality, but they don't say that Bob Marley, for example, publicly said that Haile Selassie the the king of Ethiopia in the 1960s, he said that he was God Almighty or God incarnate or something. Now, the Kebra Nagas does claim that the Ethiopian royal family are descended from King David, but I don't think they ever went so far as to claim that an Ethiopian king was the Messiah or something. That's something made up by the Rastafarians, and that's not actually Christian. It's not an identifiable Christian doctrine. Rastafarianism is not Christian, and it's not Ethiopian, and it's not African. It's a strange cult. Now, I mean, the name comes from the Rastafarian, from the Ethiopic word for prince or something. But it sounds like some made up nonsense. And well, the fact that I mean, Snoop Dogg, this rapper, can walk around saying he's the reincarnation of Bob Marley. Well, it's absurd, but you're talking about something that's already absurd. This Jamaican cult, which pretends to be African in some way, and there's this now there's this posture that Rastafarianism is an original African spirituality, which came with the black people who were enslaved in Africa and shipped to the West Indies and put to work in the sugar plantations in the West Indies a couple hundred years ago, when the sugar plantations were a big business. The thing is, slavery was abolished a couple hundred years ago, and in the 19th century there was a really violent social transformation in America and the British Empire over slavery. You know, slavery was abolished, and slavery in Jamaica was abolished hundreds of years ago. Now, but this posture that Rastafarians have against, like, I mean, there's not just them. It's like Boney M, the band, you know, singing about the rivers of Babylon, and there's this allegory made between the Babylonian captivity of the Jews and the enslavement of the Africans in the West Indies. Now, this idea of Babylon, which the Rastafarians have borrowed from the Bible, this idea of transcendental Babylon, being the evil empire of our day, this posture that the Rastafarians take is borrowed from, as I said, the Bible and from Protestantism. But there's this other thing where they talk about smoking marijuana all the time. Now, that's not, I don't know whether there's people in Africa who smoke marijuana or not, but this sort of conflation between an African spirituality and marijuana smoking and pseudo-Christian posturing and sort of Marxist political Marxist historiography. Yeah, it's sort of, there's this underlying current in Rastafarianism of Marxist historiography. Let's just say there's the rich capitalists who are white, and the poor working class proletariat who are black, and there's the rich white versus poor black dichotomy. Well, material dialectic. Now this was all invented in the 1960s. Okay. Now, if somebody, well, a crazy internet conspiracy theorist did suppose that Rastafarianism was invented by the mafia or Freemasons or something in the 60s in order to make pot smoking really cool, well, in that respect, they seem to have succeeded to make smoking marijuana cool and hip, and it's been associated with ostensibly good things. Now, Rastafarianism isn't Christianity, and it's not African. It's a really distorted, twisted, silly imposture. Now, you have this sort of idea that I mean, there's even in some silly forms of Rastafarianism this worship of the ganja tree, like the worship of the hemp plant as some kind of tree of life and tree of all goodness, and that seems to be an entirely Jamaican invention. Okay, it's a synthetic past, and it's like a modern Marxist historiography, a Marxist view of the past, invented in the 60s, surprise, surprise, and just conflated with they've just basically conflated the past with the present. I mean, slavery's gone. I mean, what was Bob Marley singing about? I know he was talking about Babylon, who enslaved the Jews, or enslaved the chosen people, and made them work. But Bob Marley, I don't think he was never a slave, because they didn't have slavery in Jamaica in the 60s, and I don't think he ever went to South Africa, and I don't think he was ever he never suffered under apartheid, and I don't think he ever. I'm not sure how much time he ever spent in Ethiopia. So what I'm trying to say is simply that Rastafarianism is bogus.